"Uncle shouldn't play pilot," Kevin said with that smug smile I knew so well, watching me check the Gulfstream's engine systems. Especially uncles who spent their lives fixing trucks. I was in the private hangar at Westchester Regional Airport, crouched near the aircraft's engine compartment, which gleamed under the fluorescent lights. My family had arrived a few minutes earlier for our planned trip to Miami, and I could already feel the family tension setting in. The jet was immaculate, every polished surface reflecting the hangar lights like mirrors. 75 feet of perfect aeronautical engineering, with Italian leather and hardwood interiors that cost more than most people earn in a decade. Kevin approached, his designer shoes echoing on the hangar floor, adjusting the buttons on his expensive dress shirt as he studied the aircraft with that calculating look I had grown to hate. "Seriously, Uncle Jerry," he continued, running his hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "Did you really think you could impress us by renting this private jet? How much is this costing? 15,000? 20,000 for the trip?" My name is Jerry Patterson, and at 63, I've built an empire my 32-year-old nephew can't even imagine. 3 logistics companies sold for amounts that would make Kevin faint if he knew. Technology investments that have multiplied tenfold in the last decade. A fortune that allows me to buy jets like other people buy cars. But to Kevin, I would always be Uncle Jerry who grew up fixing engines in his father's garage, the man who still wears plaid shirts and faded jeans, who drives a 10-year-old Ford pickup truck and lives in the same modest house where I raised my family. "The plane looks to be in perfect condition," I replied calmly, closing the engine compartment and wiping my hands on a rag. "Ready for our trip." Kevin laughed, that condescending laugh he always used when he wanted to make it clear that he considered himself superior. "Of course it's in condition. It's a premium rental jet. It probably costs more to keep this thing flying for an hour than you make in a month." Linda, my sister and Kevin's mother, approached carrying her travel bag, her face already showing signs of embarrassment. She knew her son well enough to know he was just getting started. "Kevin, please," she murmured. "Your uncle was generous in arranging this trip for all of us." "Generous?" Kevin raised his eyebrows dramatically. "Mom, he probably spent half his retirement on this weekend fantasy. It's kind of sad, actually." Kevin's wife, Patricia, stood silently beside him, fidgeting uncomfortably with the strap of her Prada bag. She had learned long ago not to contradict her husband in public, even when he was clearly being cruel. "How about we go on in and get settled?" I suggested, heading for the aircraft stairs. "The pilot said we have perfect window seats for takeoff." "Oh yes," Kevin clapped his hands sarcastically. "The professional pilot who's probably wondering how a retired mechanic could afford this. I bet he checked his credit card 3 times. Each word was a small blade, designed to cut me and put me in what Kevin considered my proper place. He had perfected this art over the years, always careful to maintain a tone that seemed playful on the surface but carried enough venom to leave scars. As my family climbed the stairs into the luxurious interior of the aircraft, I lingered for a moment in the hangar, watching my nephew greet the pilot with the false confidence of someone who believes he belongs in a world he never truly earned. What Kevin didn't know was that the jet wasn't rented. I had bought it 3 months earlier for $8.5 million, intending to give it to him and Patricia as a surprise. The trip to Miami would be the big reveal, the moment when I would hand over the keys and the ownership papers to the nephew I still loved, despite everything. But watching him ridicule my supposed financial naivety as he walked through the cabin of what would have been his gift, I began to question whether this generosity would really be understood or just seen as another opportunity for humiliation. If you've been following this story of transformation and are curious to find out how a simple snide comment can completely change the course of $1 million inheritance, be sure to subscribe to the channel. What Kevin did next would prove to be the most expensive mistake of his life. The interior of the Gulfstream was even more impressive than I had remembered. Cream-colored leather seats arranged in conversation groups, polished mahogany tables, and a fully equipped bar area that would be the envy of most private clubs. Kevin entered first, his eyes scanning every detail with that calculating expression he used to assess the value of everything around him. He touched the leather seats, tested their firmness, examined the finishes like an inspector looking for defects. "Well, well," he murmured, sitting down in the main armchair with an air of ownership. "I have to admit, Uncle Jerry, you really outdid yourself this time. That interior must have cost $100,000 just to renovate." Patricia settled timidly beside her husband, her nervous hands smoothing her skirt over her knees. Linda chose a seat further away, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. "It's beautiful, Jerry," Linda offered softly. "You've done a wonderful job organizing everything." Kevin laughed, that harsh laugh he always used when he wanted to belittle someone. "Wonderful job? Mom, he literally just had to call a charter company and say, 'I want the most expensive one you have.'" He stood up and began exploring the cabin, opening compartments, testing the lighting, fiddling with controls he shouldn't touch. It was like watching someone inspect a property they were considering buying. "That television must be 70 inches, he commented, turning on the entertainment system without asking permission. "Full resolution 8K, surround sound. Probably costs more than your car, huh, Uncle?" Every word was a little jab, designed to constantly remind me of the perceived difference between our financial situations. Kevin had built his entire identity around being successful, and part of that identity required me to remain the poor relative. "Kevin, maybe you should sit down," Patricia suggested nervously. "We're about to take off." "Relax, Patty. I'm just enjoying what Uncle Jerry's money bought us today." He opened the bar and examined the bottles. 25-year-old whiskey, premium Russian vodka, French champagne. "Man, you really didn't skimp, did you?" The pilot appeared at the cabin door, professional and polite as always. "Mr. Patterson, we're ready for takeoff when you give the go-ahead." "Mr. Patterson?" Kevin raised his eyebrows dramatically. "Listen to this, Mom. Even the pilot is getting into Uncle Jerry's fantasy." The pilot, experienced in dealing with difficult passengers, just smiled politely. "It's standard protocol to address the person responsible for the flight, sir." Sure, Kevin waved dismissively. "Let's go then, Captain. Show my uncle here how to fly a real jet." As we prepared for takeoff, I watched Kevin continue his territorial exploration of the aircraft. He photographed everything with his phone, clearly planning to post on social media about his private jet experience, crediting himself for being able to afford such luxury for his family. "Do you know how much it costs to fly one of these things for an hour?" Kevin asked once we were in the air, addressing Patricia as if I weren't there. "Approximately $15,000 an hour. Our trip to Miami will cost about $45,000 just in fuel and fees." Patricia looked genuinely shocked. "That much?" "It's the price of ostentation, honey. Some people spend fortunes to impress other people, even when they can't afford it." Linda shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Kevin, your uncle has worked his entire life. If he wants to spend his savings on a special experience for the family." "His savings?" Kevin laughed loudly. "Mom, you have no idea how much these things cost. Uncle Jerry probably spent half his entire retirement on this weekend. It's irresponsible at best." I remained silent, watching my nephew build his narrative about my supposed financial irresponsibility. What he didn't realize was that every cruel comment, every condescending laugh, was being carefully catalogued in my memory. "Look, don't get me wrong," Kevin continued, pouring himself a whiskey that cost more per bottle than he made in a week. "I appreciate the gesture. It's nice to see Uncle Jerry trying to give us the lifestyle Patricia and I have known. Kind of touching, actually." The lifestyle they had known. Kevin drove a financed BMW, lived in a mortgaged house that consumed half his income, and used credit cards to keep up appearances. But in his mind, it put him in a higher social category than me. "I just hope you didn't go into debt for this," he added with feigned concern. "It would be terrible if you lost your house over a weekend fantasy." Patricia glanced at her husband with what might have been disapproval, but quickly lowered her eyes when he looked at her. Linda was visibly embarrassed, fidgeting nervously with her wedding ring. During the 2-hour flight to Miami, Kevin kept up a steady commentary on every aspect of the jet, always returning to the central theme: how impressive it was that his poor uncle could afford such extravagance, even if it was financially irresponsible. He speculated about the cost of the food served on board, the quality of the wines, even the price of the cabin decor. Each observation was loaded with the implicit suggestion that I was living far beyond my means. When we finally landed in Miami, Kevin was the first to exit, already planning aloud how he would spend the next 24 hours of Uncle Jerry's expensive adventure. As we walked down the tarmac toward the waiting cars, he put his arm around Patricia and declared loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Well, honey, at least now we know what it's like to fly first class. Too bad it's only for today." What Kevin didn't know was that the jet had been registered in my name for 3 months. That the pilots were my permanent employees. That the hangar where he had mocked my weekend fantasy was my property. And that every insult, every condescending laugh, every comment about my supposed financial inadequacy was convincing me that maybe, just maybe, my nephew wasn't ready to receive the most generous gift of his life. The hotel where we stayed cost $3,000 a night per suite. Kevin had no idea that I owned 60% of the place. The oceanfront Royal Hotel in Miami Beach was even more impressive at night, its glass facades reflecting the city lights like diamonds against the dark sky. Our suites were on the 32nd floor, with panoramic views of the ocean stretching to the horizon. Kevin had spent the last 20 minutes photographing every corner of his presidential suite, narrating to Patricia the estimated cost of each decorative element. "See that Carrara marble bathtub," he called from the bathroom. "Probably costs more than Uncle Jerry's car. And look at that multi-jet shower. $3,000 easy just to install." I was in the adjacent suite, unpacking my simple clothes when I heard the door open without invitation. Kevin walked in as if he owned the place, his eyes scanning my space with that familiar appraising expression. "Uncle Jerry, I need to talk to you." His voice carried a tone of feigned concern that I had learned to recognize as a prelude to further humiliation. "Are you sure you can afford all this?" "Of course I can," I replied calmly, hanging a shirt in the closet. "No, seriously." Kevin sat down in the expensive armchair without being invited. "I've been doing some calculations. The jet, the suites, the meals you'll probably want to pay for. We're talking at least $100,000 for this weekend." Patricia appeared in the doorway, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Kevin, maybe it's not our place to question." "Of course it's our place." Kevin stood up abruptly. "He's family. I can't stand by and watch him go into debt for decades just to impress us." Impress. As if every generous gesture I made was a desperate attempt to win approval from people who considered themselves superior to me. "Look, Uncle Jerry," Kevin continued, approaching with that expression of fake family concern. "I know you want the family to have cool experiences, but this is way beyond your means. It's irresponsible." The word irresponsible echoed in the luxurious room I had paid for 3 months in advance. Irresponsible, coming from a man who financed his entire lifestyle with credit cards and loans. "Maybe we should cut this trip short," he suggested, walking over to the panoramic window. "Catch a commercial flight tomorrow morning, before you spend even more money you don't have." That's when Linda and Patricia walked in together, both looking nervous with the tension palpable in the air. "What's going on here?" Linda asked, looking between us. "I'm trying to save your brother from financial catastrophe," Kevin declared dramatically. "He's clearly spent his entire retirement on this weekend fantasy." "Kevin." Patricia scolded him softly, but he ignored her completely. "No, Patty. Someone needs to tell him the truth here. Uncle Jerry is living in a fantasy world, trying to play millionaire when he should be more careful with his fixed income." Linda looked genuinely concerned now. "Jerry, did you really spend your savings on this?" My own sister's question hit me like a punch in the stomach. She, too, believed that I was incapable of paying for what I was generously offering the family. "I can afford it," I repeated, but my voice sounded less convincing even to myself. Kevin laughed, that cruel laugh he used whenever he wanted to show his superiority. "Uncle, you drive a 10-year-old Ford and have lived in the same house for 30 years. Where would you get $100,000 to spend on a weekend?" Patricia looked mortified. "Kevin, this is very personal." "Personal? We're talking about family responsibility here." Kevin turned to Linda. "Aunt Linda, don't you think you should intervene before your brother buries himself in debt trying to impress us?" The silence that followed was deafening. Linda looked at me with a mixture of concern and embarrassment, clearly believing that Kevin might be right. Patricia studied the floor, ashamed of her husband's behavior but unable to contradict him. It was at that moment, watching my own family question my financial competence while staying at the property I partially owned, that something fundamental broke inside me. The generosity I had planned for months, the $8.5 million gift waiting in the legal documents in my bedroom, suddenly seemed not only inappropriate, but completely misguided. "You know what, Kevin," I said slowly, my voice taking on a tone I had never used with him before. "You're absolutely right. Everyone looked at me in surprise. This trip is beyond my means, I continued, watching the relief spread across Kevin's face. And you've shown me today exactly the kind of person you really are. Kevin smiled, interpreting my admission as victory. Uncle Jerry, I'm just trying to protect you from... From what? I interrupted. From showing generosity to people who can't see beyond their own assumptions? Kevin's smile faltered slightly. You spent the entire day humiliating me, Kevin. Treating me like a pathetic old man trying to buy respect. Speculating about my financial situation, mocking my choices, making me feel small in front of my own family. The atmosphere in the room changed abruptly. Linda looked shocked, Patricia was visibly uncomfortable, and Kevin had completely lost his arrogant confidence. I was just being practical, he began to defend himself. You were being cruel, I said firmly. And as painful as it is to admit, you taught me something very valuable today. I walked over to the window, looking out at the city lights spreading out below. Some decisions changed everything, and I was about to make one of them. What you taught me, Kevin, is that some people simply don't deserve generosity. What my nephew didn't know was that conclusion had just cost him more money than he would earn in his entire life. And I hadn't even begun to show him exactly who he was underestimating. That night, while my family slept in suites that cost more than Kevin earned in a month, I sat on the balcony of my suite overlooking the ocean with a cup of coffee I had brewed from beans that cost $200 a pound. My laptop was open in front of me, displaying documents Kevin would never have imagined existed. Property deeds, financial reports, shares in companies he admired without knowing who controlled them. My fingers scrolled through the digital folder labeled Family Project. 3 months of careful planning for this trip, every detail designed to create the perfect moment of revelation and family unity. Now, that same folder had become something completely different. I opened a new document and began to type, "Will revision, urgent changes." The words appeared on the screen with a clarity that mirrored my decision. Kevin had spent the last few years building his identity around belittling me. Every family gathering was an opportunity for him to demonstrate his supposed financial superiority, his privileged education, his business success compared to my simple past as a mechanic. What he didn't know was that every cruel comment, every condescending laugh, every moment of humiliation had been carefully catalogued in my memory. And now, finally, I had the complete context to understand exactly who my nephew really was. I called my personal attorney, Harrison Mitchell, of Mitchell & Associates in Manhattan. It was 2 a.m, but Harrison was paid very well to be available 24 hours a day. Jerry, is everything okay? His voice carried immediate concern. It's rare for you to call this late. Harrison, I need to make some changes to my will. Significant changes. Of course. What kind of changes are we talking about? I looked out the window at the city lights spreading like diamonds in the darkness. I want to remove Kevin completely as the beneficiary of all my assets. The jet, the properties, the stocks, the trust funds. Everything. The silence on the line lasted a few seconds. Harrison had managed my fortune for 15 years and knew exactly what this meant. Jerry, this is an $80 million decision. May I ask what happened? He showed his true colors today. And I finally saw him clearly. I understand. I'll prepare the documents this morning. Where do you want the assets redirected? I smiled for the first time in hours. Charities focused on technical education for underprivileged youth. Specifically, programs that teach mechanics and engineering. The irony was perfect. The money Kevin assumed I didn't have would be used to help young people like me, young people whom people like Kevin would consider unfit for success. Jerry, are you absolutely sure about this? Once it's signed, it's going to be very difficult to reverse. Harrison, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. After hanging up, I opened my email account and began drafting messages to the property managers of every hotel, restaurant, and entertainment company I owned in Miami. The instructions were simple: document all of the Patterson family's expenses during our stay, but maintain absolute confidentiality about my ownership. I wanted complete records of every dollar spent, every service used, every courtesy offered. Not for billing, but for demonstration. To show Kevin exactly how much his concern for my spending was costing the coffers he didn't know about. If you're following this journey of family discovery and want to see how one person can completely underestimate those they love, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the outcome of this story. The next morning, Kevin showed up for breakfast at the hotel's panoramic restaurant with that confident energy that had become his trademark. He had slept well, clearly satisfied with his family-saving performance the night before. "Good morning, Uncle Jerry," he said, pulling up a chair at the table overlooking the beach. "Did you sleep well? I hope you weren't up worrying about the bills." Patricia and Linda were already seated, both looking uncomfortable with the residual tension from the night before. I had ordered the most expensive breakfast on the menu: eggs Benedict with caviar, imported smoked salmon, Dom Perignon champagne. "Actually, Kevin, I slept very well," I replied calmly, cutting my salmon. "I made some important decisions last night." "What kind of decisions?" Her curiosity was immediately piqued. "Decisions about the future. About family. About what really matters." Kevin smiled, interpreting my response as confirmation that I had finally seen the light about my financial situation. "I'm glad to hear that, Uncle. Sometimes we need people who care about us to show us reality." Linda watched me with concern. "Jerry, you're not planning on doing anything drastic, are you?" "Define drastic," I replied, taking a sip of champagne that cost more per bottle than Kevin paid in rent. Kevin laughed, that confident, cruel laugh. "Come on, Uncle Jerry. Don't be so dramatic. You just need to go back to living within your means. There's nothing wrong with that." It was at that moment, watching my nephew patronize me while drinking champagne I had paid for, sitting on a property I partially owned, talking about financial limitations to a man who could buy his entire company with pocket change, that my transformation was complete. The generous, patient Uncle Jerry had died the night before. In his place was someone Kevin was about to meet for the first time. And when he discovered who was really sitting at the table with him, it would be too late for anything but regret. After breakfast, I suggested we all meet in the hotel lobby for a little surprise before the flight back. Kevin was beaming, clearly pleased with his victory the night before in making me acknowledge my financial limitations. "What kind of surprise, Uncle Jerry?" he asked with that familiar condescending smile. "I hope it's nothing too expensive. You've already spent enough this weekend." "Oh, I'm sure you'll find it interesting," I replied calmly, checking my watch. At 11 o'clock sharp, Harrison Mitchell entered the hotel lobby, carrying an Italian leather briefcase and wearing a suit that cost more than Kevin earned in 2 months. My personal attorney for 15 years, he had that imposing presence that came from representing some of the richest men in the country. "Mr. Patterson," Harrison greeted me formally, "I brought the documents you requested last night." Kevin frowned, clearly confused by the appearance of an obviously expensive lawyer during our modest family trip. "Excuse me," Kevin interrupted, "but who exactly are you?" "Harrison Mitchell, of Mitchell & Associates," he replied professionally. "I have represented Mr. Patterson's business and personal interests for many years." "Business interests?" Kevin laughed nervously. "What business interests? Uncle Jerry is retired." It was at that moment that I decided to begin dismantling Kevin's world, piece by piece. "Harrison, could you explain to my family the exact nature of my business interests?" Harrison opened his briefcase and removed a set of documents. "Certainly. Mr. Patterson is the majority owner of 3 logistics companies that he sold between 2005 and 2015 for a combined total of $147 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Kevin had visibly paled, his mouth slightly open as he processed the information. Additionally, Harrison continued unperturbed, he maintains a diversified investment portfolio currently valued at approximately $83 million, including holdings in 17 technology companies and commercial properties in 6 states. Linda let out a small gasp. Patricia was looking between her husband and me with growing understanding and horror. "That can't be right," Kevin muttered, his voice barely audible. "He drives an old Ford. He lives in a modest house. He's a mechanic." "Actually," I interrupted gently, "I built my first logistics company at the age of 27 with a $5,000 loan. The mechanical experience helped me understand fleet maintenance, which became my competitive specialty." Harrison pulled more documents from his briefcase. "As for properties relevant to this trip, Mr. Patterson is a minority owner of this hotel, with a 60% stake. He also owns the Gulfstream G650 you used to get here." The color drained completely from Kevin's face. "He owns what?" The jet isn't leased, I explained calmly. I bought it 3 months ago for $8.5 million. Cash. Kevin sat down heavily in a lobby chair, his world of assumptions crumbling around him. But why? Why do you live the way you do? The house, the car, the clothes. Because real value has nothing to do with ostentation, Kevin. Something you've never understood. Harrison took a sealed envelope from the briefcase. Mr. Patterson, here are the revised documents you requested. I took the envelope, feeling its weight. Inside were the papers that would remove Kevin completely from my will, redirecting $80 million to educational charities. Kevin, I said, my voice perfectly calm, you spent this entire weekend humiliating me, treating me like a pathetic old man trying to impress people who think they're better than me. Uncle Jerry, I didn't know, he began desperately. No, you didn't know. But that's not the point. The point is how you treated me when you thought I was vulnerable. When you believed you were in a position of superiority. Patricia was looking at her husband with a mixture of horror and contempt I had never seen before. You mocked my generosity. You questioned my financial competence. You made me feel small in front of my own family. I opened the envelope and took out the documents, holding them so Kevin could see the legal letterhead. So I decided that maybe you're right about one thing. Maybe I should be more careful with my money. Kevin rose from the chair, panic growing in his eyes. What are these papers? They're changes to my will, Kevin. Changes that will remove you completely as a beneficiary of any of my assets. The realization hit Kevin like a freight train. $80 million. An inheritance he never knew existed until 5 minutes ago, and which he now found he had lost through his own cruelty. You can't do this, he whispered, his face now completely white. Actually, Harrison interjected professionally, as the sole owner of the assets in question, Mr. Patterson has complete legal authority to distribute them as he sees fit. Kevin looked around desperately, seeking support that would not come. Linda was crying silently. Patricia had physically distanced herself from him, clearly processing the true character of the man she had married. What Kevin didn't realize was that his humiliation had only just begun. I can't do this to me. Kevin shouted, his voice echoing through the elegant hotel lobby. Several guests turned to watch the spectacle my nephew was creating. I'm your family. I'm your blood. Harrison remained impassive, watching the scene with the professionalism of someone who had witnessed many similar reactions over the years. Patricia had moved even further away from Kevin, clearly mortified by her husband's public behavior. Kevin, you're making a scene, Linda whispered, trying to calm him down. A scene. Kevin turned to his mother, his eyes wild with desperation. Mom, he just took $80 million away from me. $80 million. Do you understand what that means? It means, I interrupted calmly, that you are finally facing the consequences of your actions. I signed the revised will documents right there on the lobby coffee table as Kevin watched my pen move, as if he were watching his life unravel in slow motion. Uncle Jerry, please, he begged, falling to his knees beside me. I can change. I can be different. Just give me a chance to prove I deserve it. The transformation was instant and shocking. The arrogant man who had spent the last 48 hours humiliating me was now literally begging on his knees on the marble floor of a 5-star hotel. Kevin, I said softly, looking down at him where he knelt, you've had 32 years to show me who you really are. And you've shown me. Harrison tucked the signed documents into his briefcase. The documents will be filed today, Mr. Patterson. The charities will be notified about the funds this week. Kevin paled even more. Charities? You're giving my money to strangers. It's not your money, Kevin. It never was. And yes, I'm giving it all to educational programs that teach mechanics and engineering to underprivileged youth. I smiled slightly. Young people like I was. Young people like you would consider unfit for success. The irony didn't escape me. The money Kevin assumed I didn't have would be used to empower the very people he despised. Patricia finally found her voice. Jerry, I need to apologize for my husband. I've never seen him act like this before. Actually, Patricia, I replied gently, I'm sure you have. You just never paid attention. She lowered her eyes, knowing I was right. Years of small cruelties, condescending comments, subtle humiliations she had chosen to ignore. Linda stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Jerry, I'm so sorry. I should have stood up for you. Linda, you don't need to apologize for your son's actions. Each person is responsible for his or her own choices. Kevin was still on the floor, now rocking slightly. This can't be happening. This can't be real. It's very real, Kevin. And it's permanent. Harrison handed me a copy of the signed documents. Mr. Patterson, is there anything else that needs to be taken care of today? Actually, yes. I took out my phone and made a quick call. Marcus, please prepare the jet for takeoff in an hour. Only 3 passengers for the return flight. Kevin raised his head suddenly. 3 passengers? But there are 4 of us. Not anymore. Patricia, Linda, you are welcome to fly back with me. Kevin will need to find his own way home. The shock on Kevin's face was absolute. You can't abandon me in Miami. Of course I can. You're a grown man with a credit card. I'm sure you can figure out how to get home. Patricia looked between us, clearly torn. Kevin, I think I need some time to think about all this. Patty, you can't leave me here. You left me no choice, she replied, her voice firmer than I had ever heard it. The man I knew would not treat his family this way. Linda hugged Patricia sympathetically. You'll always have a place to stay with me until you decide what you want to do. 2 hours later, we were in the air. Patricia and Linda sat together, talking quietly about the day's events. I sat alone, staring out the windows of the jet Kevin had mocked as too expensive to rent for my means. My phone vibrated with a series of text messages from Kevin. Uncle Jerry, please reconsider. I beg you. Followed by, you don't understand what this means to me. And then, I'm going to sue you. This isn't going to stand. I deleted all the messages without responding. Over the next few weeks, Kevin's attempts became more desperate. He showed up at my house 3 times, each time being politely but firmly turned away. He called Linda in tears, begging her to intercede on his behalf. He even hired a lawyer to try to contest the will, but quickly discovered that he had no legal basis for doing so. Patricia moved in with Linda temporarily. In our conversations over dinner, she revealed details about the marriage that I had never noticed. How Kevin constantly belittled her when he thought no one was paying attention. How he controlled the family finances and made her feel grateful for luxuries he paid for with credit cards. I always knew he had that cruel side, she admitted one night, fidgeting nervously with her wedding ring. But I never imagined he would show it to you. You've always been so generous to us. 6 months later, Patricia filed for divorce. She told me she couldn't look at Kevin anymore without remembering how he had treated me when he thought I was vulnerable. If he can treat someone in his family like that, she explained, what guarantee do I have that he won't do the same to me when I need him? The charities that received my inheritance began transforming lives almost immediately. I received quarterly reports on the program's progress. 500 young people enrolled in the first year, an 80% completion rate, 95% job placement after graduation. Every thank you letter that arrived was more valuable than any words of gratitude Kevin could have offered. 18-year-old Marcus wrote, Mr. Patterson, the program got me off the streets and gave me a profession. Now I make more in a month than my mother did in 3. 20-year-old Jennifer sent photos of her first workshop. You taught me that mechanics isn't a man's or a woman's job, it's a job for anyone with talent and determination. Linda and I became closer than we had ever been. Our weekly conversations turned into regular dinners, where she shared her shame at not realizing who I really was, and I shared my reflections on family, money, and respect. You could have told us about your wealth years ago, she said during one of those dinners. Why would I have done that? I asked. So you would treat me differently because of the money? Respect that comes from fear of poverty isn't real respect, Linda. It's convenience. She nodded thoughtfully. Kevin learned that the hard way. Kevin made his choice. When he thought he had power over someone he considered inferior, he chose cruelty. That says everything about his character. As for Kevin himself, news reached me sporadically through Linda. His consulting firm went bankrupt after the story of how he treated his family spread through the business community in our small town. No one wanted to do business with someone known for humiliating relatives who had helped him financially. He got a job selling insurance in a town 2 hours away where no one knew his story. The BMW was repossessed by the bank. The house was sold to cover credit card debt. He moved into a small apartment and drove a used Corolla. He asks about you sometimes, Linda told me during one of our monthly dinners. He wants to know if you would ever forgive him. Forgiveness isn't about him, Linda. It's about me choosing not to carry resentment. I forgave Kevin a long time ago. But forgiveness doesn't mean trust is restored, and it doesn't mean the consequences disappear. 2 years after Miami, I received a handwritten letter with no return address. The handwriting was Kevin's. Uncle Jerry, the letter began, I know I have no right to write to you after everything I did. I know my behavior was unforgivable. I'm not writing to ask for your money back or to beg for a second chance. I'm writing to tell you that you were right about me. I was cruel, arrogant, and felt superior without reason. Losing everything has taught me who I really am, and I don't like what I see. I'm trying to be a better person now. Not to get anything back, but because I finally understand that being a good person is its own reward. Thank you for teaching me the most expensive and most important lesson of my life. I kept the letter in a drawer in my desk. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. Patricia remarried 2 years later to a public school teacher who treats her like a queen. She invites me to all the important family events, and always takes time during those occasions to thank me for opening her eyes to what a healthy relationship really looks like. 3 years after Miami, I opened my 4th technical training center, this one focused specifically on renewable energy. At the opening ceremony, dozens of former students from the other programs showed up, many bringing their families, all wanting to tell their success stories. During my speech, I looked out at the audience of hopeful young people and their proud families, and I thought of Kevin. Not with anger or vindictive satisfaction, but with the quiet understanding that some people need to lose everything to find their true worth. Technical education, I told the audience, isn't just about learning a trade. It's about learning that your value as a person doesn't come from how much money you have or what position you hold. It comes from how you treat others, especially those you think are beneath you. After the ceremony, a young woman named Lisa approached me. Mr. Patterson, may I ask why you do this? Why do you spend so much money helping strangers? I smiled, thinking of the question Kevin had asked so differently 3 years earlier. Because I've discovered that the only real wealth you can have is what you share. Everything else is just numbers in a bank account. Today, I still drive my 10-year-old Ford, still live in my modest home, still wear plaid shirts and faded jeans. The difference is that now I do so knowing that personal worth has nothing to do with outward displays. The jet remains in the hangar, available when I need it to visit training centers or for short trips with Linda and Patricia. But I found that traveling with people who genuinely respect me is infinitely more enjoyable than sharing luxury with those who despise me. Kevin learned the hard way that underestimating people can cost you more than money. It can cost you everything. But in the end, it may have been the lesson he needed to learn most. If this story of family, respect, and consequences has touched your heart and you want to see more stories about people who have discovered that judging others by appearances can be the most expensive mistake of their lives, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The last I heard, Kevin was volunteering on weekends at an adult literacy program. Linda said he finally seemed to have found purpose in helping others instead of feeling superior to them. Me? Well, I just signed the papers to build 5 more technical training centers in communities that need opportunities for talented young people. Some lessons are worth $80 million. And some people manage to learn them, even after paying the highest possible price.